All right, well, everyone, thank you so much for being here this evening. Welcome, first and foremost, to the Voters Win Fireside Chat. Happy election season, everybody. So I am very excited. My name is Miguel Guerrero. I'm the manager of public affairs, and our team has been really instrumental in getting the voter engagement efforts on behalf of the Golden State Warriors to the Bay Area and really within our market. So really glad that you can be here today. Today's conversation is also going to be recorded so that we can share amongst our public education partners as well as community partners that are doing the work in this space to elevate our voices and make sure that everybody gets involved in the polls leading up to the election. I'm very excited to have this portion, a very exciting conversation among some of our state leaders, folks that we admire within the basketball space, and young leaders that are doing some incredible work just to mobilize the vote in their communities, spread the word, and really make it a lifelong habit to participate in the election. And for elections onwards. So with that, I will turn it over to our amazing panel that's right behind me, who will walk us through this amazing conversation. So without further ado, I will let them take it on.
So hi, my name is Mahi Jariwala. I'm a freshman at Stanford University, and I'm an alumni of the KQED's Youth Advisory Board. I have done journalism in sports, covering topics that transcend the game, including representation, to equity, to civic engagement. I've had the opportunity to interview Warriors' own Steph Curry, Olympic gymnast Jordan Childs, and WNBA's Haley Jones. And I'm really honored to moderate this panel, so I'll let them introduce themselves now.
Well, it's good to be with you, and I want to thank the Warriors for this opportunity, as well as these amazing panelists who've joining us today. I'm Dr. Shirley Weber. I'm California's Secretary of State.
I'm Ryan Ishmati, and I'm a senior at Saratoga High School in the South Bay. My freshman year, I co-founded a publication to further my interest in journalism, and for the last 3 years, I've been on the KQED Youth Advisory Board, and have done live radio show pieces covering politics. Thank you.
Hi everyone, it's a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Emily Gordetsky. I'm an SFUSD high school student, but I'm also part of the League of Women Voters Youth Council. I'm also a founder of a VR headset app called VR Democracy, where we aim to teach others about the process of polling and why you should even be civically engaged in the first place. And yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Hi guys, Donald Foyle here, former Golden State Warriors. Played 10 years with the Warriors, and I had a chance to obviously play other places, not as important. But for the purpose of this conversation, I started a Democracy Matters organization in 2001, and I started the Kerosene Lamb Foundation in 2003, and I've been engaged in the work of political engagement most of my life.
So, Secretary Weber, I'm going to start with you. Can you tell us about the role of Secretary of State and what that entails?
Well, the Secretary of State is it's the third constitutional officer of the state of California. There are 8 constitutional officers. There's the governor, the lieutenant governor, and then there's the Secretary of State. So my role in that sense is I'm elected statewide. And my task is, I have multiple jobs. One, I deal with all the businesses and nonprofits of California. All those things are registered with me. The archives are in my responsibility. But in this case, I am the official election officer of the state of California. I'm responsible for all elections, all voting that occurs in California. California is the largest voting base. There are almost 23 million Californians who are registered to vote out of the 40 million Californians who live here. So we have the largest voting base in the United States. And so my responsibility is to make sure that all of our elections are safe, secure, that every registered voter has an opportunity to vote, that everyone has their voice to be heard, that all votes are counted accurately, and that we report that to obviously the state officers. And so we handle all elections, small elections, whether it's a school board election, whether it's a water board, or whether it's the United States, the President of the United States. I am responsible for all elections that occur in the state of California.
And how have you been involved with civic and voter engagement?
You know, I've been involved all of my life. And that's important to understand because, and that's what I'm trying to do with young people, is to help make them life voters, not just because you like a person or this is your issue that you want to have heard, but because you believe that this is really your voice and this is your responsibility and the one way that you can have your issues heard that represents your community. When I say I've been voting, basically involved in elections my whole life, my parents were sharecroppers, and they never got a chance to vote when they lived in Arkansas. My actual grandfather and grandmother in Arkansas never got a chance to vote at all before they passed away. And so voting is a central part of my life, so much so that when my parents came to California, not only registered to vote, my mother worked in the polls. Eventually, our house on 45th Street became a polling place because there was nowhere else for people to vote. And so people came to my house to vote when I was in middle school. And as a result, when I walked down the driveway in the morning, I couldn't go in the living room because people were voting in the living room. And I walked back in the evening because they were still voting in the living room. And my parents took great pride in the fact that they could offer an opportunity that was safe for people in South Central LA to vote. So I grew up with the vision of voting, and I've had voting and civic engagement in my life all during middle school, high school, college, and beyond in terms of community service.
Amazing. My next question is for O'Donnell. How have you inspired young people to use their voice through your organization, Democracy Matters?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things is to tell young people is that we give them kind of, when you turn 18, it's like you've been given a power, right? And this power is so unique because this power is equal to all the other powers. So you've been given a power that older people have had for generations, and you've now been given that power. And really what it's about is about how do you build communities? How do you build a coalition? How do you teach people how to be good citizens? And what are essential ingredients in being a good citizen, right? How do you approach an issue that affects many of you in a community? How do you talk about those issues? So for me, I spent most of my life believing in this idea that one of the worst thing that has happened over the last 20 plus years in our country is Citizen United. I believe that money in election makes for really, really bad policies overall. I think a democracy at its core is about its people. And when money equals free speech, as the Supreme Court has said, and it kind of supersedes everything else, we lose the most important ingredients in a democracy, which is a politician's job is to go out and advocate for a position and is to garner support from the constituency. When that is kind of convoluted because one person may have $1 million or $2 million to be able to do more rather than listen to the will of the community. So for me, one of the things that has driven my career is this idea is to pull people back and say, look, we have to have a system that is responsive to the entire constituency in an area. You can't just simply say that money equals speech and that's it. So to me, it's about telling young people you have this amazing power that equals all the adult power in your life, and you can do things with this power if you understand the power and if you understand how the system has been created, right? So the system has been created. We don't do a very good job of teaching what the system is, but then we give people this power at 18 and we say, now go, figure it out, right? If you become, when you start driving, we give you books, we give you stuff to study, to become a better driver, to learn how to parallel park, and then we say, you're 18, now go vote. So I think for us, what I try to tell people, voting fundamentally is about your voice. But more than that, it's about your power, right? It's like, how do you unleash and use your voice? How do you learn to garner other people's support to use your power as a group, as a Black, as a community, and to advocate for things that you think is important to your community?
And you've done a lot of work in this space, and I'm curious, what inspired you to get started with Democracy Matters in the first place?
So for me, when I first got to the United States, I've been given this opportunity. I came in at the age of 15. I never had any aspiration to go to college. I never had any aspiration to have a life beyond becoming a fisherman, right? And basketball opened up this amazing door to me. And for me, one of the biggest things is like, how was I going to give back to the next generation. You know, that kind of power I've been given. I had two strangers came to the Caribbean and brought me to the United States and give me this amazing opportunity. And for me, it was about gratitude, right? So I remember being in my college classroom. I had this amazing professor, Professor Coleman Brown, and he was teaching us about philosophy and religion. And the conversation, and as I could remember it, it was like whether or not my generation was apathetic. And I just did not want to believe that, because it didn't make sense to me. So I was looking at my young friends going out, working in soup kitchen, working for Habitat for Humanity, but they weren't involved in election. So I wanted to ask a question when I had the resources to form an organization, and the question was, what would move young people? And for me, the reason they weren't getting involved in politics because they thought politics wasn't for them. And so for me, I wanted to tell them that politics is for you, you just don't have the things that politics required, which is mostly money, right? You have student debt, you have all this stuff, but you don't have a lot of money to pay $5,000 to go to dinner. So for me, I wanted young people to understand that the system could be theirs, but they had to learn how to use the system, and they had to advocate for things that will make the system better, not just for themselves, but for the community they care about.
And my next question is geared towards Ryan and Emily. You both are under 18, and so what drew you to your work with voter engagement?
Yeah, I can start this off. So personally, I identified an issue in my community around a year ago that a lot of my peers have no idea what to do when they turn 18. I had a conversation with some of my friends, and they're like, when I turn 18, wow, I have to vote, I have to do this, I have to do that. What? And I was like, well, this needs to be resolved. This is an issue that I don't want the next generation to have. I want us to grow up and be civically engaged and just foster this sense of a culture that is civically engaged. So it was really important to me to start giving back to my community in terms of setting up voter registration drives at my high school and even in my local library to make sure that not just adults know that they must register to vote, but also teens, they should know that they can pre-register to vote and start getting involved in their democracy even if they're not 18 yet. So this was really important to me, and I want to give back to my peers and my community in this way. I'm going to pass it to Ryan.
I think for me, the context of my upbringing was incredibly significant in how I view voting. My parents came from Iran, which is essentially an authoritarian theocracy where the democratic process is just a non-starter. And growing up, understanding that my family was in an environment where if you didn't like the way government was going, you did not have the democratic process as a way to share that, has made it feel like a duty. I feel like it is really our responsibility as Americans to take part and defend this democratic process that we talk about. But I recognize that it becomes so easy for us to take that for granted when we haven't been in places. But it's so important to remember the democratic process is not the rule, it's the exception, and we have to actively guard that.
Yeah. And so going back to you, Emily, why do you think it's important? Your work focuses a lot on younger voters. Why do you think it's really important that we have young people interested in voting, people that are even under 18 to pre-register to vote?
Yeah, definitely. I think that this all comes down to making sure that the next generation is so involved civically that they know what to do when they hit 18. But also, it's a place for us to make sure that we know that our voice has a power. A lot of my teens don't even know what the Electoral College is, not even until they maybe hit college. So it's really important to me that everyone knows that they have a voice in our government, and the people that are making policies that directly affect us, they should be aware and they should help make sure that those people have their right interest in mind. So that's definitely something that is important for me. And yeah, our world's changing, and so should the next government leaders, and they should have ideas that reflect us. And so it's really important for youth to know that they must get out there and they must speak about what matters to them. So.
In talking about youth voting, what role, and this question is geared towards Ryan, what role do you think social media plays in the election?
I think the campaigns have answered that question, and they feel that it plays a huge role. For KQED, for my youth takeover piece this year, we looked at how social media advertising was playing into the election cycle. And both campaigns, I think the most recent figure I've read is between the two major presidential campaigns have spent over $60 million just on meta ads alone. And I think there's some distinction between the platforms the campaigns are leveraging. The Harris campaign is more geared toward Instagram, Snapchat. The Trump campaign is more interested in X and Trump's own platform. But clearly, I think both campaigns have come to the realization there are very few individuals or voters who have made up or who have not made up their minds about these candidates. So it's really going to be about voter turnout.
You know, talking about social media and the misinformation that goes on in a lot of, online outlets, when your team, Secretary Weber, makes these resources for people, how do you keep, what's going on online, the misinformation that's out there in mind when creating resources for people?
Well, we have quite an extensive team of individuals who work in our office to deal with the issues of communications and disinformation and misinformation. And that's something kind of new in terms of what we do as an office, because it's become much more engaged and prevalent in terms of what people are looking at and how do we deal with that. And so we have to respond to all of the issues that are on the misinformation and disinformation. We have a whole section on our website that basically tries to give people the correct information. We have workshops on how people need to understand what they're being told and whether or not, how do you find resources that help you understand what's correct and what's incorrect. Because at one point, people just kind of ignored social media and discovered that by not getting ahead of it and getting in front of it and addressing it directly, a lot of misinformation was out there about how you vote and where you vote and who the people are and all the kinds of things. And then we see that now on the media where there's a lot of fact checking because there's a lot of information people put out there that is totally incorrect. So we have a whole section that deals with that. Our young folks help us. We put out toolkits for all of the universities so they can obviously help us as well in terms of information. But it's really, really important. And that has become a major issue in all of the elections and how do you deal with it, and as well as in our office, making sure that we get much of our information about voting out on the various social media platforms. We have a number of individuals who are our trusted messengers. A lot of our entertainers and athletes have taken their own platforms and put out information on voting, and we're very grateful to all of them for what they've done because we've engaged them in helping us with the information because we can't do it all by ourselves. But many of them are very concerned about elections and the power of elections and whether or not people have the right information as they're making their decisions. So it's a big issue. It's a major issue, as most of you know, in all of the areas. And so we work very hard along with all the social media platforms as well as other ways in which we get information out. But we're very grateful to all of our partners who work with us because there's no way our office could do everything that's necessary. And so we have a lot of our folks, even some of the warriors here, who are using their platforms to get the information out on when to vote and how to vote and all the ways in which you can get information.
And as you mentioned, professional athletes have often used their platforms to speak out about issues. O'Donnell, as a former NBA player and warrior, how have you used your voice on social media?
Yeah, I think everyone has a different way of approaching the media and how you see social media. I feel like it is very important to inform people. And for me, there's a lot of reasons why I will endorse a candidate. But for me, this year, being a dad for the first time, it was a very easy decision for me. So I was able to do that. But one of the things that we try to do as a league is to really provide the opportunity for as many of our players to not only, some of them obviously don't want to get too political, but they want to make sure that their followers have the right information. And I think that if you look at the Coaches Association, they're looking at ways in which they can help protect the system rather than a candidate. So a lot of work right now the league is doing around making sure we have people volunteer at polling station, because we've seen a drought of that in the last several years. So that become really crucial to ensure the stability of the system. Using the arenas in certain areas in order for people to vote, and we've seen the Coaches Association go out and do a lot of stuff like, you know, having election day this year. We're not playing any games. Those are really strategic decisions we made, because we understand that, you know, as players, there's not much we can control, but in so much as we can help, empower, and educate and elevate our fans, that is very crucial.
And Emily, what role does social media play in the outreach process for you in terms of your work with voter engagement?
Yeah, definitely. I think that social media is a form of rapid dissemination of information, and it can be used in both positive and negative ways, but I've tried to use my platform to make sure that I can get my fellow high school students to get out there and pre-register, and I've made a lot of infographics that I posted on social media that hopefully have the same effect as O'Donnell here, but more geared towards my fellow high school students. So that's one way that social media has been playing a really key factor, and I think it's also great that we have so much more voter participation now, given the fact that I can go out there on Instagram and post every single day, be like, hey guys, this is the countdown of the many days you have left until you can register to vote. So I think it's been a really helpful tool so far, and I hope it's being able to be used in positive ways out there in our community.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, social media can be a place of misinformation and disinformation, but it's also a great way to get information out there, especially in terms of youth voters and kind of meeting your audience where they are. I know you mentioned a little bit earlier about your use of technology in terms of your work with voter engagement. Do you want to talk more about that and how technology has shaped your work in that realm?
Yeah, for sure. So I've used technology, specifically VR headsets, to make an app that is basically guiding a future voter. Maybe they're even 10 years old to 81, and they have no idea what it's like to be voting in the United States. We guide them through a process where you put on the headset, and then you are automatically transported into the polling place, and you are guided through this journey of what happens when maybe you put a candidate that you didn't mean to put, or you need another ballot. We guide you through every possible aspect of something that could go wrong to make sure that you're really prepared on voting day. So that's something that I've currently done to use technology in the best way possible to make sure that we prepare everyone for voting day. And hopefully this will also increase voting participation, because studies have shown that if you feel more prepared, you're going to go do it. So that's the reason behind that. Thank you.
And Secretary Weber, you touched on this earlier, but the importance of voting regularly. Why is that so important? I think some people, there's certain cycles, or maybe people feel more inclined, but why is it important that people vote on a regular basis?
It's really important, because once you begin the process, and I did this with my students, because when I had taught at the university, you had to register to stay in my class. Otherwise, I would have a very bad attitude about you. And I'd always ask my students, how many are registered? And I said, well, you can't pass this class if you don't register to vote. And that would wake them up immediately. And so, we'd have these conversations about it. But I discovered that in the process of constantly talking about elections and public events and current events and helping them to understand what happens when you vote and what happens when you don't vote, because there are consequences for not voting. People don't realize. They think that when they don't vote, it just gets thrown in the trash somewhere. No, there are consequences, because you no longer have the power, and you have just given your power to someone else. And so their power increases by your absence at the polls. And so we help students to understand that. And what happens is, I've discovered students years later come along and tell me about how they got involved and what they did and how they still vote. And when they don't vote, they feel really bad. They start thinking about, oh my God, if someone loses by one vote, oh my goodness, and I didn't show up, it's a bad reflection on what I wanted and didn't get. And so we try to help young people understand that, so that they understand it's not about the fact that you like this person who's running for office. There'll be some you like and some you don't. But it's the fact that you have to have a voice And you have to let people know that you're there. Because when you do have a voice and you're there, I can tell you elected officials listen to you. They listen to your community. They actually look and see. I didn't discover this till I became an elected official and worked a little harder in campaigns, that people actually read what communities have great turnouts. And those communities that vote in 70, 80% are heard more by their elected officials than those who vote at 20 and 30. Because they know those folks who regularly go vote have the ability and have the power to get rid of them if they choose to, because they're going to go vote. Those who don't vote or vote every now and then, nobody worries about them. Not really, not as an elected official. I worry about them because I want everybody to vote as Secretary of State. But people don't recognize that they have given up their power, and someone else across town now gets the attention of the elected official, gets the attention of the governor, gets the resources that come out of the state coffers in terms of money, and you basically have given up your power. So we help our folks understand it's not about who you pick this year and who you pick next year. It's about the fact that you will always show up. You will be present, which means every elected official would know that I know this person's going to show up. Let me talk to him because he's going to be there. She might be there depending on the circumstance, and then if it rains and her shoes don't fit tight, then she ain't coming, okay? We understand that. And so what happens is that they're going to talk to you because you're considered a 5 out of 5 voter, which means you vote every election in the last 5 elections, and they know that you will be there in November, and they're going to fill your mailbox with mail and all kinds of good stuff because you are someone worth investing in. And that's your power. And you should understand that it's not just that you showed up this one time. It's the fact that you are a lifetime voter. And they're always going to make sure that your issues are heard, that your community is heard, and that the resources and the influence that your community needs is there. And that's why communities must vote, especially communities that are struggling, that may not have the money he's talking about to buy somebody, but they have the ability to go to the polls, and their vote counts just like the person who had $1 million to give away. Their vote counts. And so that's why we try to tell young people why it is so important to vote in every election, because believe it or not, someone is counting how often you go to the polls. You may not, but those who run elections know how often you come and if you're going to come again.
That's very powerful, especially as a first-time voter. I'm very, very excited for this year. Ryan, as someone in journalism, how are you approaching these topics of civic engagement?
I think for me, it goes back to the foundation of this country. We were founded upon Enlightenment ideals, the belief that for our government to work, we need to have the consent of the governed. But in order to have consent of the governed, you need informed consent, and you need an informed electorate. And I think it's the responsibility of journalists who, in effect, are defenders of democracy to make sure that in the treacherous waters, I think one guest we had on the show in April called it the Wild West of social media. We need to be out there making sure that the correct information is obtainable and is understood. Because when people go to the polling places in making these determinations, that is the crucial factor. And I think also on this issue of every vote matters, that really was hammered home to me when I was at a political event recently. There was an election night watch party, a local one for the primaries, and I was talking to some local politicians, and I was talking to one, and he told me, Ryan, if anyone ever tells you again that my vote doesn't matter, tell them about my race. And he told me about his local Sunnyvale council member race, where he had a lead of, I think, 3 votes. Then they did a recount, and it flipped the other way, and it flipped. And finally, it ended up being a tie. So they actually had no process for the tie. They ended up putting both names in a bag, and the clerk picked one out. But one vote can absolutely make a difference, and in that race, it certainly did.
And on that note, I'm going to lead us to our closing remark. I would like all of you guys to give your answer to this, but just kind of a closing statement. Why is it important to vote?
I would say the most important reason to vote is to claim your power and to understand how to use your voice. And really, it's about holding politicians accountable. Like, it's not good enough in a democracy to say, I elected you. Well, in a democracy, you have to say, are you doing the job that I elected you to do? And if not, I'm watching. So you really have to be a guardian of democracy. So for me, really most important above anything else, really about claiming your power, claiming your truth, and understanding in a democracy, the only way a democracy works is if the feedback of the people in it. So you may not know about the Senate, you may not know about the House of Representatives, you may not know about the Supreme Court, you may not care about the presidency, but understand what is the fuel of all of this. The fuel that guides this whole thing is you, the people. And it's important that you're informed, but most importantly, you learn how to use your voice.
For me, I think it all roots back to community engagement. It's where, I like what Adonal said earlier, it's about where we're all equal and we all have this voice and it's really up to us to use it. It's really important for me that we are all coming together, we are all learning about candidates and making sure we're making an informed vote, and then getting out there together as a community and voting for the next generation and who will lead us. And it's all comes to that in the end, making sure that we're engaged.
We live in the most powerful country in the world, and on November 5th, each and every person has a responsibility to shape its government, our government, and we should fulfill that responsibility.
Well, being at the end of the tail, but I agree with everyone, all they've said, because voting is a very, very powerful thing. For 40 years, I was a professor at San Diego State. I founded the Africana Studies Department and the Women's Studies and Chicano Studies departments that were there, Native American. I was involved with all of them. And but one of the things I learned in this whole journey of studying African American history, that there were two things that people fought for vehemently. One was education, and because people were denied that education, and that education was really important. My father didn't get it, and so he was determined that his daughter was going to get all that there was. But education, because it gives you an opportunity to make decisions about your life and where you want to go and how you want to live, and to fight for your space. Even when people deny you that space, you get that. The other thing that African Americans fought for in this whole journey toward justice and freedom was the right to vote. Those are the two things. When you think about all the civil rights eras and the women's movement and everybody else, people wanted education. They wanted quality education so they could actually represent themselves. But they also fought for the right to vote. Because without that, even your education is dwarfed. Even your opportunities are limited. People can steal your land, they can do other things, and they can take away your justice and your right to be the person you want to be because you're not voting for the people who make the decisions for it. And African Americans fought and died for the right to vote. Women fought and were beaten in streets and limited in what they could do for the right for women to vote. And those who come to this country as citizens want to become citizens, not just because it may give them a Social Security card, but because it gives them the right to vote. It gives them their voice. It gives them their power. It gives them their individuality. And so when I think about voting, I think about all those folks who died, who lost their lives. I think of the Fannie Lou Hamers of the world who were beaten and raped in prisons because what was she doing? Something so powerful. She was registering people to vote. And we may not think it's powerful, but those who fought for it believed it was powerful. And so I recommend to everybody to study that, to understand it, because when you do, then you know that you have to vote. You have to vote, that it is so powerful, that it really defines this nation, it defines you, and it defines generations to come. So this is not a light thing that we do. This is not something we do if we have time. This is something we do because we must.
I think that deserves a round of applause. Well, very, very well said. Thank you guys so much again. Thank you guys so much for listening. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can we get another round of applause for our panel discussion? I would be remiss, but to really iron in on the fact that go out and vote. Our organization also has a really helpful tool through our partner, I Am a Voter. You actually can take out your cell phones if you aren't registered to vote or you're looking to get information on your upcoming election, that you can text Warriors to 26797. Once again, I will plug that again, Warriors to 26797. And our friends over at I Am a Voter are able to have a text tool that gets you informed leading up to the election. And we also have a helpful resource through warriors.com/voterswin that plugs you actually to a few resources from the Secretary of State's office, as well as each local jurisdiction that you may live in the Bay Area, to get localized election information for you. So really important to iron in that fact, to go out and vote, to participate, to use the voice that you also flex in addition to your community around you. So again, just want to thank this panel again for this amazing conversation, and thank you.